on today's show.
I became an entrepreneur. And as we were discussing before this, I had pure panic for many days on end of where am I going to find this money and how am I going to make this work, up into, oh my gosh, I have too many clients and I can't manage all of this work. I need to bring somebody in, to, oh gosh, now I've hired this person and I'm responsible for their payroll and all the business just went away. What am I going to do?
It sounds as glamorous as everyone believes.
Yeah. I definitely didn't hide under tables and cried several times an afternoon, 5 days a week. It was, oh gosh. Anyway, I, in truth, really enjoyed that ride. I think the roller coaster of being an entrepreneur is one that we gloss over often because of guys like Gary Vaynerchuk or Tim Ferriss or even Mark Zuckerberg, who make it seem as though it's akin to the rise of celebrity in Hollywood.
Yep.
You know, everybody just has an idea.
Bunch of meetings.
It works. And then magically you have millions of dollars and it's just all a gravy train that's just pouring money into your bank account. That is not true for 99.999% of us.
Yep.
And the reality is, like any other business, the hours are grueling, the pace is terrible, you hate everything at times, and at times there are glorious moments of absolute perfection, and the rest of it is really hard.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Creator Institute podcast. Your host, Koester.
Jason Nellis is a triple threat. When we talk a lot about creators, we talk about the power to use creation events, these events that they can use to differentiate themselves, to stand out, and to really transform their trajectory. And Jason is one of the people who has done 3 of them in his early career and used these creation events to transition from a role as kind of an early employee at Hulu into an executive at one of the fastest growing kind of early stage startups in Silicon Valley. Jason is someone who's been able to create a podcast season as a tool to stand out. He's done a video show that he's put together, and he's also run and put on an event. At some point, he promises me he's going to write a book, and I sort of feel like he gets credit for it. He was sort of my assistant in the first version of teaching this class to a set of young undergrads, and so I feel like maybe he does get the quadruple threat. We'll see. He's still holding out for it. But what I do think is important to understand is that oftentimes people get fascinated by saying, I've got to do these things faster and quicker. And Jason really shows us the power of sort of stitching these pieces together to really build this sort of ramp to get him where he wanted to go. He left sort of LA and sort of had to figure out his own way out here on the East Coast before using these creation events to sort of be able to unlock these cool opportunities where now he is the first employee for a Kleiner-backed company in San Francisco. He is the face of this company that is doing a new way to think about unboxing videos and unboxing products. Jason's an awesome guy. I have to say, one of my favorite people and favorite humans, always someone I can count on when I need, and he's doing cool stuff. So Jason Nellis, everyone, I think you're going to enjoy the conversation. Jason Nellis. God, it's so great to have you back in town.
Thanks, man. It's a real pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. This is fun.
I know. So we have a long history together, many adventures.
Some may say too long.
Too long,
Far
indeed.
Too long.
Yes, and now that you've left the Fair District and moved back out to the Bay Area, you're much more tolerable.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's
one of the reasons that they ran me out of town is that I had become, quote, insufferable, end quote, which I think, frankly, is too kind of a word, but it was nice of them to do that.
That's great. So I think I'm excited to chat with you. I think I did some cyber stalking, and we're gonna chat a little bit about your checkered past.
Excellent. And
talk about some of those moments that you may not look too fondly on.
No, it's fine. That thing with the collie, not my fault.
But I think part of what I really wanted to chat with you a little bit is you've had some really interesting experience as a creator and some different mediums that we talk a lot about books. And although you have had a lot of experience with me working with some of our young authors, a lot of your background is in other arts, and I think as we talk about with creators, typically they create in one of 4 mediums: the in-depth written, which is often books, events, and you've had experience in that, podcast audio, which you've had a lot of experience, as well as video. So I think I'm looking forward to talking with you because I think you check all three of the other boxes and have deep knowledge on the first. So you're sort of like the utility infielder.
Many have called me a Swiss Army knife, much to my detriment. So I appreciate that.
I like it.
Would it help if I gave my background a little bit? I mean, or should we just dive right into the?
Let's dive in because I'll probably share a lot of those things about you in my own mean way. Because I really want to start out by talking about the fact that you had this aspiration as a young man that you were going to be the next great thespian.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your decision to pursue acting as a profession and in college, and then the stint out to LA to fulfill those dreams of being an out of work actor who's waiting tables.
I never had to do the waiting tables part, thank goodness. No, my tendency towards performance was very natural. As a kid, I was always that kid in the restaurant who wanted to wave to everybody and say hi, and memorized lines from Monty Python movies as early as possible. I think I can still quote all of Caddyshack by heart. And when I was in high school, I was in every play I could get my hands on. I even directed and produced a couple. But moving to undergrad at Northwestern was a no-brainer. I wanted to go to a top-tier theater program, and I wanted to pursue something that also had a fallback if that didn't work out. And with my surprising parents' blessing, they let me go to Northwestern to pursue theater because they knew it was a liberal arts degree, which I think was the first in a series of steps that actually worked out very well for me. Many of my friends who have Bachelor of Fine Arts degrees have had trouble finding work and do the very typical LA hunting for jobs while at the same time waiting tables experience. I made it through 4 years of undergrad, spent some time in Chicago, and then left for LA and managed to land to start my star career as an actor right when the writer's strike hit in 2007.
Perfect timing.
It was great. I have a knack for excellent timing.
The secret to comedy, as they've always said, is timing.
Timing.
Yes.
But yeah, the writer's strike turned out to be a blessing and a curse for me because while it completely, for the moment, derailed my aspirations to be an actor, it forced me to look outside of that world, which had been, for me, very much tunnel vision. When I realized that there was other opportunities, particularly in Los Angeles, where I could pursue my love of entertainment without necessarily becoming an actor and a part of this larger machine where I had to be fed into it. I could actually be part of the machine that was doing the building. I was very fortunate and was able to lock a job in at Hulu, which nobody knew about at the time.
Yeah, this is before Hulu was a Hulu.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was full-time employee number 45, and now there are about 2,000 people.
Wow.
So I was very fortunate. And those 5 years, I developed a tremendous set of skills that very much played into my longer-term career. Not only with the performative aspect and being able to give presentations when doing recruiting or hosting guys like Bob Iger at our offices and being able to talk to him and not feel intimidated by his presence, all the way to managing client relationships and ultimately being in charge of the relationship with NBC Universal. So I was in charge of managing our day-to-day dealings with SNL and 30 Rock and Parks and Recreation and those projects, as well as their cable networks. And so you have to appreciate that the kid who started really as the beer guy was eventually put in charge of $100 million in annual revenue and wonder what they were thinking. And maybe if they were perhaps drunk on the beer from years prior.
Well, I want to go back to your sort of aspirations of leaving Chicago to go out to LA, because, we oftentimes have an idea of who we're going to be. Who is the actor that you're going to be? I'm going to tell you before you go, and then you can tell me. But I always have this, you sort of being the wisecracking sidekick to sort of that would be my kind of, sort of doppelganger for you. Is you be the one who's got that quick joke a little bit that sort of.
That's not doppelganger. That's called typecasting.
I'm typecasting you as that witty, brazen guy who sort of is always the one that the laugh track is going to go right after.
Yeah, I would have done really well in Big Bang Theory, I think.
Killed it.
But actually, to be fair, that is actually not far from what I assumed I would be cast as. There are a number of roles for guys who are lab assistants with a little bit of attitude kind of a thing. And I sort of presumed that that's at least where I would start.
Yeah.
In truth, many years later realized that that's probably as far as I would have ascended without serious additional work. I'm not sure I would have been terribly excited to pursue. In the end, that part of performance, I really enjoy the work and the study of it. If you give me a piece of Shakespeare, I will workshop that till it's dead with somebody. But I'm not actually all that excited to put it up on stage and show it to a lot of people. I really enjoy the work. I don't necessarily enjoy the 8 shows a week part of that on theater, or the 14-hour grueling days on a TV set. I've learned since then that the work part of it is not actually as exciting to me as the learning and engaging and the human interaction part of it, which turns out is actually to my benefit, because lots of other stuff, like the stuff I do now, much more towards that and much more engaging in a more personal level in that kind of work. So I got lucky. It turned out that my dreams of being an actor were totally the wrong direction, but I had the 95% of other skills to go other directions and be even happier.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, did you have a sense, when you start something new and early? Hulu at the time was sort of this interesting idea. Streaming wasn't something. Cutting the cord was just sort of an idea. What were some of the indicators that you saw that this might be a trend that was much bigger than most people realized when you were just starting out at Hulu? What were some of those signals?
Well, early on, the logic of it made a lot of sense, which I think is important in any startup. If you can't see a clear delineation in terms of the value proposition comparative to what's happening in the world right now, you're already in the woods and you're never going to get out.
Yeah.
So when I started, the recruiter first out of the gate was, we're replacing DVDs. And I'm like, great. I hate DVDs. Right. I hate shopping for DVDs. I just want to be able to magically
You strike me as a Laserdisc guy. You were a big Laserdisc guy.
I was really into Betamax back before I was born, apparently, if that ages me at all. No, for me, the logic of it made sense at first. But then as we started to really prepare for and launch about a few months, I think it was 2 or 3 months after I started, and the initial response told me that we were onto something much larger than just a product people would enjoy. And then over the 10 years that followed that, the shift in entertainment from home video really driving everything to now there being such a disruption in video and content consumption across the board. To give context, when TV shows, as an example, back in the 60s and 70s, you could not make a profit on a television show until you sold it into syndication. Selling it into syndication usually required about 100 episodes being produced, which is about 4 to 5 years worth of broadcast. You were very, very, very lucky to get a show to that length to sell it into syndication. Otherwise, most TV studios had to sort of assume a loss on it. Home video and DVDs changed that. It made it so that you could sell every season as an individual DVD set pack. Our coming onto the scene helped disrupt that even further. So now you could actually really start to monetize an episode the day of or even the day after its broadcast. And for me, as somebody who fell in love with entertainment from an early age and wanted to be part of this world, seeing those shifting tides opened my eyes to the very first time that there were larger waves at work, right? There was an energy in entertainment that wasn't just producing lots of things for movies and TV shows, but there were whole subsets of economies where I could find much happiness in engaging with those and building those. And being part of Hulu gave me that education to learn how to see those things and to be ultimately, not to say more, quote unquote, than just an actor, but to not simply be relegated to one very small sliver of it, that I could learn to find my place with a greater skill set and more confidence that what I could do would be valuable to other people. And
you also shared with me that you started to see how there was this bigger field afoot too, which was to say that small independent creators might have a platform. Like Hulu at the start, a lot of people assumed it was the big networks, but now these independent creators are starting to have a platform where they can release their content on it. It was part of what you started to lead. Talk a little bit about as the platform evolved to become more of a sort of a democracy of content producers having access to audiences.
Well, I think beyond Hulu, when you look at the larger shifts in entertainment since its inception, right? Netflix started as a DVD rental service and then went into streaming shortly thereafter. And really, to their credit, they broke the mold on original content first. They went directly to creators, gave them the latitude and budgets to create great shows like Orange is the New Black or House of Cards or something like that. And Hulu in its early days really struggled with that. I was part of those early efforts. And we worked with high-end creators, but we didn't have the budgets at that time. And this was years before The Handmaid's Tale, which won its massive set of awards and has really put Hulu on the map, so to speak, in that regard. We early on were not terribly bullish in user-generated content, which is what made up YouTube at the time. It was a lot of cat videos, a lot of David After Dentist kind of stuff. What we have observed since then, however, is a number of creators who've come onto platforms like YouTube and developed their audiences and developed their voice and developed their content in a way that has allowed them to then go to places like Amazon or to Hulu or to Netflix or even onto YouTube now with YouTube Red and really enjoy creative freedom and the budgets to allow themselves to really express in a way that is tangible to their audiences. So for me, the formula has always been you need deep pockets, you need creative freedom, and you need the talent to back up that creative freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have all three of those, you're dead out of the water, no question. Without any one of those three, let alone all three, you don't end up in a position to really express yourself the way that you want to. You cut corners, or if you're working with other people and their voices are taking over yours, the vision gets muddled and ultimately doesn't work. Personally, I'm now much more bullish on the independent creator on a platform like YouTube who has total creative freedom. They might be restricted by resources, but they'll learn to fix that over time, and they'll eventually give themselves all three of those characteristics to eventually build a multi-million user follower. To me, that's the future in many ways. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
And I think your story as an entrepreneur has some twists that we'll talk about there. But I think one of the things that's interesting, that I often share with people is those early jobs are one about learning, but also about building the network of people that are going to change your trajectory. And I think one of those people that actually connected us was the CTO of Hulu, Eric Fang. Talk about how you and Eric met, and a little bit about how you sort of endeared yourself to someone who is now in a lot of ways a kingmaker in the Valley.
Well, he's going to hear this and he's going to think, Kingmaker, that's a nice title. I should have that printed on a t-shirt.
I think you should.
And given that he's currently my boss, I probably can't say all of it. No, I'm teasing. No, the value of relationships to me is epitomized in my relationship with Eric. So Eric was the CTO of Hulu, as you mentioned. He was also the CTO of Flipboard. He's currently a partner at Kleiner Perkins, which is one of the major venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. He's also, hands down, one of the most kind, generous people you're ever going to meet. Mm-hmm. And my 2 years working for him... He
should have a much bigger ego. I mean, hear this. He should. He's so, unassuming.
You get to know him well enough. It's okay. No, the reality is that even from his time at Hulu, and for context, he became the CTO at Hulu because Hulu purchased a company that he had started in Beijing that was dealing specifically in annotating YouTube videos. So in fact, he was on the video and streaming train long before other people were. But Eric has, in my mind, been epitomized as the example of how you do it right. He's always been eager to look at larger trends, but also to be in the weeds and solve small problems that add up to larger ones. My working for him was less about being mentored by him in that time as much as him saying, here are the things you can do, pick the three that are interesting, and then go do them right. And learning to take projects on and ask for help when I needed, and then to make sure that I didn't bother people when I really didn't need the help. Those kinds of skills became incredibly valuable. And sometimes it was dumb little things like, I need you to figure out how to feed 25 devs. Mm-hmm. Versus it's you and two developers and you're going to Cornell for 3 days and you need to structure the recruiting time so that it makes the most value for everybody involved. Mm-hmm. And working with him in those early years also provided me with a number of relationships that have come back to pay dividends years later. Mm-hmm. The company that I'm involved with now is made up primarily of people that have worked with Eric on and off for years, myself included. And that affords us a language you don't get when you're building a startup with people you haven't worked with before. You get the ability to rapidly iterate, to develop ideas without having to mull them over for days at a time, and ultimately to become really nimble the way that a startup has to be to succeed. And a lot of that, I would say, is due in no small part to Eric's ability to cultivate great talent, myself not included, and to engage them in a way that is both an openly democratic process of discussion and then determining the right path and saying, this is what we're committing to, let's do it.
Mm-hmm. And so, if the leave and come back sort of mentality here with Eric. You had this relationship at Hulu, and in some ways, there was the right time for you to come home, son. And you brought you back to DC, which is how we first connected. Talk about that journey from kind of coming from a place of this company that was just making it. You were figuring out sort of things to coming to DC and try to have to reinvent yourself. Tell me about that first 4 to 6 months when you were in DC trying to figure out where was the second act for Jason Nellis? Well,
if you were to title that chapter in my life story, it would definitely be pure unbridled panic. Moving back to DC was very much a personal decision. Mm-hmm. I'd spent 5 years at Hulu. I was fairly confident that if I'd stayed there longer, it would probably stagnate my career a little bit. And in retrospect, I was right. There were opportunities that would have popped up later, but for me, it was the right time to go. Moving back to DC was an opportunity to re-engage with my family, who's all based here, to sort of reset a little bit. I'd had some health problems in college that I hadn't really dealt with emotionally. So it was an opportunity to come home, be safe, and figure all of that out. Unfortunately, I'd sort of neglected the part where I was going to find a job when I came back here. And for the first 4 months, I was just scrambling to find something.
Yeah.
Hot take for everybody. I don't think moving home at the end of October was a good plan for me because November and December aren't awesome hiring times. So it wasn't until January, early February of that year where I landed a job through a Hulu connection at PBS and in their digital distribution division, which was totally a match for my skills, but ultimately unsatisfying. And so for the first 6 months, I vacillated between panic and boredom. And this isn't to poo-poo on my former PBS colleagues. I don't think that any of them would be surprised that they'd hear this now because I only stayed there 8 months.
Yeah.
When I left, I was just determined to do anything else. I was very fortunate that because I had some experience in social media and marketing in that vein because of my time at Hulu, I was able to cobble together a marketing consultancy that turned into a small agency.
You became an entrepreneur.
I became an entrepreneur. And as we were discussing before this, I had pure panic for many days on end of where am I going to find this money and how am I going to make this work, up into, oh my gosh, I have too many clients and I can't manage all of this work. I need to bring somebody in, to, oh gosh, now I've hired this person and I'm responsible for their payroll and all the business just went away. What am I going to do?
It sounds as glamorous as everyone believes.
Yeah. I definitely didn't hide under tables and cried several times an afternoon, 5 days a week. It was, oh gosh. Anyway, I, in truth, really enjoyed that ride. I think the roller coaster of being an entrepreneur is one that we gloss over often because of guys like Gary Vaynerchuk or Tim Ferriss or even Mark Zuckerberg, who make it seem as though it's akin to the rise of celebrity in Hollywood.
Yep.
Everybody just has an idea.
Bunch of meetings.
It works. And then magically you have millions of dollars and it's just all a gravy train that's just pouring money into your bank account. That is not true for 99.999% of us.
Yep.
And the reality is, like any other business, the hours are grueling. The pace is terrible. You hate everything at times. And at times there are glorious moments of absolute perfection. And the rest of it is really hard. And I'm fortunate that my time at Hulu, the same way that other people's other jobs have helped inform them the skills that they need to succeed, it turned out, got a really good education on how to learn quickly at my time at Hulu, which is absolutely the one skill that you need to do that. The other being you have to learn to be uncomfortable and be okay with that, which is, I think, the two of them, the foundation of any decent, if not good, entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think you as you said, that time was humbling, but also instructive in terms of the importance of sort of building a brand, building a business. And I think you undertook a couple of projects that you may not have sort of known at the time would sort of inform everything else. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of a couple projects while you were in DC, and one including the collaboration we had on together. But let me start by talking about your podcast adventure. Because I think when you started your podcast, it was still early in it, and I think there's still a website up of your podcast called.
I'm not sure it goes anywhere.
Called Startup Jab.
Yeah,
and for someone who has a design pedigree, it's really poorly designed.
Yeah, it is. I can't take credit for that. Teague Hopkins, who co-hosted that show with me, very much more the technical mind, and fortunately to his credit, he is not a designer, but he is a phenomenal project and product manager, as well as a workflow designer.
Yep.
So that website was never going to win any design awards, but it was really good at being effective at getting you exactly what you needed to get to listen to us.
Yep. So tell me about the thought process of deciding to do a podcast. You're in the midst of building a business, and what was the sort of the crux that said I should do a podcast and I should try and attack this?
Well, I would say first off that any business, regardless of what you're in, can benefit from content marketing. There's always going to be an audience, even if it's infinitesimally small, that will benefit from you putting yourself in some sort of sight, sound, and motion media to engage with that subject matter. And building a small marketing consultancy, I knew that I needed to put us out there more, and was working on a couple of different efforts on social media more directly. And at the same time, a platform came out called Blab, which no longer exists, I'm sad to say. But the gentleman who built Bebo, which is a social network back in the day, had tried to reinvigorate that brand, and Blab was one of their early attempts. What made it interesting was that it was like Google Hangouts, but it was as much for broadcasting as it was for hosting conversations. You had 4 people in a grid who could live stream at the same time via camera, and the quality was halfway decent, and it gave you the opportunity for a chat room as well attached to that. But what really made it special was that in addition to the broadcasting portion, you would get delivered, if you so chose to, the video and audio recordings of your conversations, which made podcasting super easy.
Yeah.
So I started to play with it. I really fell in love with the platform, and I showed it to Teague. And we both agreed that it would be a great opportunity for us to start to host some conversations and just see if anybody was interested.
Yeah.
And within a couple of episodes, the guys at Blab noticed us, so we would get on their front page. We started developing a small following, and it became a weekly ritual for about 35 or so weeks. We got very good at building conversations and interviewing people, and ultimately playing in the sandbox of podcasting. Unfortunately, by the time we got around to episode 35, I decided that the marketing consultancy wasn't interesting to me anymore, sold the business. Teague was working on something else, and I'd taken some time to go travel. So that episode sort of was like, well, Jason's going to go travel to Europe and we'll see when he gets back. And that's the end of it.
Yeah, it's the last episode in here is still up.
Yeah.
And I listened to part of it. It's actually a fun episode, but I think the header to this one says, "We're back from our quasi-planned hiatus and delving deep inside Jason's mind as he plans an even bigger break to process existential issues and walk hundreds of miles and eat lots of food."
Which I did all of that.
Yeah.
Including the food part. Let me just say, Spain on the ground, best food ever.
Amazing. And you know, you did have a lot of sort of a diverse set of guests. You had people who are in the business of baking. You have people who are building dating companies. A lot on sort of the future of video gaming. Kind of what was the goal of producing an episode in terms of like what did you hope would come from it other than delighting the listeners?
I think for us, Startup Jab was really an attempt to build an additional layer of conversation around startups and entrepreneurship across the board. Personally, the cult of personality that is built around Silicon Valley, and as somebody who lives there now, I can speak to this even more truthfully, but the cult of personality around Silicon Valley and the idea of celebrity as it pertains to startups is, in my mind, very one-sided and unfortunate in that regard, right? In any instance where all you're talking about are the same dozen names over and over again as the people that you hold up as luminaries in that world, really belies the 99% of other people underneath who are just working hard and just trying to build something sustainable and trying to innovate in a space where they have so many things against them. So Startup Jab was an attempt to really broaden that conversation to say there are so many people in the world who may not have the title of CEO in their startup, but they are entrepreneurs themselves. They're starting up in lots of different ways. One of my favorite guests was my friend Lauren, who used to be the press secretary at NASA, and hearing how they not only themselves are trying to innovate and build and grow with ever increasingly difficult budgets within which to work, while at the same time, other people utilize NASA technology for all sorts of things, was a fascinating conversation. And it, to me, really epitomized what we were aiming for. We wanted our audience to be engaged. We wanted them to talk about us afterwards because obviously we wanted the audience to grow, but we also wanted them to come away with something that they would never otherwise be able to appreciate. Lauren's world, when she was working at NASA, was very specific to working with guys like the Washington Post and New York Times and NBC4 and trying to get the message of NASA in that way. Seldom did she have the opportunity to really sit down and talk about the nuts and bolts of her work. And to us, that was the best part of what we got to do. So learning not just you have to have a grand vision of your product and you have to know 10 years out that you're going to disrupt. Like, it was none of the buzzwords you hear. And it was really about like, every day I have to get up and I have to make sure my boss is in the office by 9 because if he misses that interview, the whole day is screwed. And hearing about the real, ground level problems of entrepreneurship across multiple worlds, I think was really valuable to our audiences. And we got great feedback. It is my disappointment that Teague and I did not continue that, only because I totally torpedoed it. If you're looking for blame, it's my fault. But it really was for us a great opportunity to develop a conversation that at the time wasn't happening. Now there's 20 podcasts that are doing that, all with much better finesse than we ever did. But Teague and I really felt that this was a great way for us to share our voices and did, in fact, inform many of the other efforts that he and I have both pursued since.
And I think what's interesting, too, is, obviously, as you are running an agency and you're talking to people who are experts, like Lauren in the world of PR, it gives you this layer of credibility to say, let me show you how I've helped talk to experts in crafting press strategies and those sorts of things. So in some ways, it's a perfect example of your ability to sort of translate, to demonstrate kind of your own knowledge of marketing and those pieces. Any kind of outcomes that were ever surprising from the podcast that was.
The only true surprising outcome was every now and again, somebody would come up to me and go, "Oh my gosh, you're the Startup Jab guy." And like that to me was bizarre. And that happens very infrequently now, but it was a little bit, I wouldn't say that we were in any way popular, but every now and again, somebody would on the street go, "Oh, somebody sent me your podcast. It's nice to meet you." And I was like, how did that happen? Oh gosh. So yeah, I mean, genuinely, I mean, in terms of skill sets, surprise that came out of it. I am no longer afraid to do an interview like this.
Yeah.
And to me, the first 10 episodes are some of the most painful content I think I'll ever produce, because even though I'm good at conversation, I wasn't good at interviewing. And there's a cadence to it, a conversational protocol to it. And early on, I'm talking over people and just being jerkish as I usually am.
Surprise.
Yeah, shocker. But I think what we both learned out of it was how to conduct an interview in a way that is not only engaging for the guest, but provides value for an audience and ultimately helps to build that audience.
And tell me also a little bit about one of the other experiences you had is you did sort of start to develop a cultish following in some ways in DC, if that's a way to describe it. You started to become a thought leader in DC. For sure, in the DC Tech.
I think that's a very generous thing to say.
It's fair, but you were involved in helping put on some new events in DC to sort of bring the community, which is another example of sort of creating something that it kind of demonstrates competency and in some ways levels up your play. Talk about putting on some of the events you put together in DC and how that played into kind of your own world.
Well, when I moved to DC. You actually put me in touch with the organization here in DC called Fosterly, which has been instrumental for many years in helping to develop, some of DC Tech's best companies and to really provide a conversation starter in their either Day of Fosterly, which I helped put on, or Collaborate Conference, which was a 1,000-person conference we put on at the Ronald Reagan Center. In addition to that, my friends and I were part of the DC Lean Startup Circle. So I got to learn, the Lean Startup methodology from the ground up, Startup Weekend. The real lesson from all of that is put yourself out there, engage in the process, be a newbie. There's a great ad out for, I can't remember which game it is, but the idea is that like everybody starts out as a noob and everybody gets frustrated and they throw chairs and they hate themselves. But eventually you're not a noob anymore. Eventually you get that first win, you get that first success, you learn the hard skills. And I think that being involved in those events taught me which of my skills from theater and theater production applied to things like conferences, to meetup groups, to day-long strategy sessions and study groups, and learning how to do things like marketing branding sessions and all of that. And really what came out of that was just being bad at it at first, being okay, being really bad at it at first. But to me, the event side of things is really just like putting on a big party. Right? There's a lot of considerations you have to think about. It's the food, it's the drink, it's when are people going to arrive, when are they going to leave, what are they going to do in the meantime? Is there music in the background, et cetera? I'm a novice at that compared to many of my friends who specialize in event production and strategy. But you learn very quickly that presentation and experience go hand in hand, and that applies outside of things like conferences and parties. It applies to when somebody comes to your website, as an example. That experience is really important.
Right.
Your credibility trends in part on whether somebody comes to the site and thinks, wow, this is really well done, or thinks, wow, this is amateur hour at its worst. So nowadays, I'm not doing as much of that. The events that I do are much more asynchronous. We're filming content and putting it on YouTube, but that's an event. And I'm thinking about it from the perspective of when somebody hits play, if they're not engaged in what I'm producing and they're not stuck all the way through, I have not succeeded yet.
Yeah. And I think so to your point, we've foreshadowed a little bit this existential crisis. In some ways, the podcast and the events that you started to do, in some ways had almost a desired effect to the nth degree, where you started to get busy, have a big team, and start to think about what you really wanted to do. And in some ways led to that existential crisis, right? I mean, if you
keep saying that existential crisis, like I haven't had 12
listen,
before.
you're
it's therapy hour with Jason Nellis.
It's what we're going to hear. But it's interesting to see that, like that from being freaked out to the first 4 months here of how in the God's name am I going to do it, to in some ways you filled out your dance card so much so that it sort of did lead you to say, like, all right, what do I want to be doing?
Well, I think the 9 years of time between graduating college and ultimately leaving DC, there were so many sort of conflating things that happened during that time. Between my 5 years at Hulu and my time here and filling out that dance card, so to speak, I realized during my time off, my self-imposed hiatus last year, for clarification, I hiked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, which I highly recommend. It's a beautiful month-long walk. To me, what it ended up codifying was that I really did feel passionately about startups and entertainment, that I wanted to find something that would be in that vein. I was okay that the very next thing didn't necessarily take me exactly to that place, but that it would eventually put me on that path in some way. And I was just going to trust the process. So November of last year, I started applying to any number of different companies. I let friends who were all over the country send me leads that I could pursue. I was talking to BuzzFeed. I was talking to Snapchat at one point, Uber. Not seriously. None of those people took me seriously. But a friend
as they
of mine,
shouldn't.
No, clearly. But I ended up getting a role as a senior manager of marketing at Vizio, the TV manufacturer. And they had a San Francisco office that served their ad technology division. And I ended up moving out there. The job was not going to be for me long term. I think that was clear to everybody from the beginning, but I was perfectly content to just apply my various skills to that and figure out what I was going to do as I got my sea legs. And then, of course, within 6 months of that, Eric Fang, the savior of Silicon Valley.
Kingmaker of Silicon Valley, by the way. Humble Kingmaker.
Humble Kingmaker. No, we ended up having a lunch 5 months into my time at Vizio, where he was, it's as though we were catching up. He's like, hey, I'm doing this thing. You should come and work for me. I was just like, I should come and work for you. Yeah. And so that was it. And that turned out to be exactly the thing I had sort of been hoping for.
And that got you your first real shot at sort of being on the founding team of a sort of a Silicon Valley fast growing startup, right? You'd come into Hulu, when it was, it had product market fit.
It had product market fit already.
You knew what it was, lots of funding. And then you sort of came to DC and in a lot of ways figured out your own entrepreneurial chops. But you weren't building a fast growing venture. It was, San Francisco was going to give you that education in spades.
Yes. And in fact, my 1 year in San Francisco now has probably been equivalent to my 5 years at Hulu or my 4 years in DC, without a doubt.
Dog years.
Yeah, very much. Which is why I'm showing my age. These bags under these eyes, they're never going away now.
Thank God this is just audio.
Oh gosh, you can see them if you go on our YouTube channel. It's not great. No, the reality is that joking about Eric's king-making aside, the one thing that Eric has a knack for is finding talent and putting it together in a room and being able to, even if we're not at product market fit in the first couple of months, know that there is something there that can be turned into magic. And we got very lucky that, when I joined, the company that I'm a part of now called Packaged had just raised their Series A, and they have contributions from Kleiner Perkins, Google Ventures, now GV, and Forerunner Ventures. And from the get-go...
We call those contributions investments, Jason.
Yes. We call those investments. Yes. I like to think of as contributions to the larger effort. But the Series A was GV and Forerunner. And that to me was immediately a sign that there was already something here, right? Yep. It isn't just, we're putting some money into this and seeing where it goes. When you have Google backing you, and obviously they're, the whole alphabet system of products and services, with Forerunner, who did things like, the investments on Jet.com and Warby Parker and lots of other big retail brands, you start to think, okay, well, there's clearly something here that we're gonna build that's interesting. And so a few months after I joined, we launched at CES at E3 in LA. And from the get-go, we were like, we're not fitting the market the way that we thought we would. And that actually turned out to be a blessing. And it turned out, in fact, that the education that we've all gotten in the last 6 months around rethinking our product fit, figuring out which pivots we were going to perform, and ultimately shifting the product substantially, I would not have been able to do that had the last 9 years of other things been thrown at me. And being in a place of discomfort, because when I joined, I was not supposed to be a host. I was not supposed to be on-air talent. I was going to just do the marketing. But since I'm the only guy with any experience being in front of a camera, hey, guess what you're going to do next? All right, let's give it a try.
And I think that's a great, great summation in some ways of the fact that this guy who was nervous and uncomfortable interviewing is now the host of a daily video series on unboxing of products is quite an interesting one. And in some ways is the evidence that you could do it. They probably could have said, hey, we should hire someone, but they could look at you and your witty sidekickness and know that you're...
You know what? Can we stop? I'm a leading man. I don't need this witty sidekick nothing.
You would be great as a Big Bang fourth or fifth guy, the roommate who never showed up.
I'm like Maris on Frasier. You never see me.
No, not at all. Yeah, exactly. And so what has it been like, coming in and saying, hey, let's build a video presence. Again, now you're the fourth, you're the checking off the fourth box here in this creator connection, building a video presence. Now you've got to kind of go out and figure out how to do something daily,
right?
And also learn how to be compelling and interesting in front of a camera. What was that experience like saying we're going to do this?
Like everything else, it's been a complete, just destruction of every other thought I had about the process ahead of time. But it's been incredibly educational to try to build a workflow that is not only sustainable, but, it's not going to eat your bank account and it's not going to cost you $40,000 out of the gate. I've also come to very much appreciate the guys who do this for a living, truly, because it is really hard. And what we're doing pales in comparison to the amount of work that they put in.
Yeah, you're doing about 6 to 8 minutes a day?
It's 6 to 8 minutes a day, and it's 5 days a week. And the first lesson in that by far is how great process is when it works really well. So our process is relatively straightforward. I source the videos that we use in the show. I have a production manager who helps me come up with the pertinent notes and sections we're going to use within the show. And then we go film. And filming has gone from being a 45-minute self-immolation experience where I'm just constantly yelling at myself for bad takes to 15 minutes of this is the stuff we just got to get on film and let's get it done. And once that is all finished, we ship the notes and the sections that we want to use, as well as the footage that we've created, to a post-production editor that we previously worked with at Hulu. And he takes anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours to produce the final version of the video. He puts it up on YouTube. We clean it up for copy and edit and tags and all the stuff that we need to do. And it goes live the next morning. And we do that now 5 days a week. I don't know if we're going to keep doing it 5 days a week in the new year, but it's been a really educational process. Really educational experience. The process is key. You can't keep throwing curveballs at it. You just have to be comfortable that at a certain point, you're building the thing and you're going to keep running the thing and you're going to make slight tweaks to the thing until you're ready to blow it up and start all over again.
Yeah.
I imagine our government could learn from some of that experience, but that's neither here nor there. But the other part too is there is in fact a level of comfort one can develop in front of cameras that doesn't require theater training.
Right.
One of the other folks I work with is a woman who has been in beauty and makeup for years. She's done sales, she's done customer relations, she's done, product experience kind of stuff. And she is now working on a number of other efforts that we're doing, including a beauty and makeup vertical that we're in process on. And the experience of working with her and her developing her on-camera persona really shows that you don't need the training. You just need to learn to be comfortable. You need to learn to have a conversation with a camera or a microphone and just know that you may feel silly at first, but that silliness goes away very quickly. And it really boils down to self-confidence and just knowing that if you do it often enough, you'll get it right.
What was the lead time to that first episode? So how much time of planning did you do to say, like, we got to put our first episode out? I wrote a full imaginary script first. So I took the templates that I had seen. Was it full or was it imaginary? I've been feeling... It's a little both. It's in my head. If I had everything, what would I say right now? But it was in fact... how long was the first episode that you wrote? It was intended to be the script of an hour's worth of show. Because our original concept was a once a week long form, hour-long show where the majority of the content would actually come from the videos of other YouTubers, right? Got it. So rather than us producing a full hour of new content, it was kind of more like Access Hollywood, where you'd have some conversation and then clips, and conversation and then longer clips, an interview where you could just, you could have a conversation for 9 minutes and then more clips, right? The idea was that we were not necessarily going to film an hour every week, right? But how do we produce what ends up being an hour's worth of content? And just so everyone knows, I guess Unboxed is the name of the app. Unboxed.tv, and you can get it on iOS or just on the web. And it's really about unboxing videos, that there's sort of this cult of people who are unboxing products and things. I don't know that I'd use the word cult. No. So Black Friday and Cyber Monday this year, more people bought on mobile than in actual retail, an in-person retail. The concept of the platform came from the idea that there are a number of different trends that we're seeing in not only retail, but also in online engagement. More people are watching videos on their mobile devices than ever. More people are watching those videos longer on average than ever. More people are buying on mobile than ever. Less people are buying in physical retail. And the number of people who do essentially their own version of Home Shopping Network or QVC at home, whether it's selling products, reviewing them, unboxing them, whatever the mix of that is for each individual person, the number of those personalities and their followings
are growing exponentially throughout the years. And YouTube isn't necessarily doing everything in its power to provide specific product development for them, right? They have to build for the lowest common denominator. So whatever they build has to work for a product reviewer, a mom who does baking, a self-building comedian, and your teacher who wants to show a math lesson, right? All of these things came together to show us how Unboxed could be possible and other verticals in the same kind of way, not just tech and devices as we focus on, but also toys, beauty and makeup, maybe fitness, home goods, etc. Okay, so you get all that together, you start with a product and you go, this is the thing we're going to start with. And then you build it and you go, oh, we misunderstood some of these trends. We got to rethink some of this. And ultimately you get to a place where, you're like, all right, well, we're going to do the original content ourselves. How do we even think about that? So getting to that place, I looked at a script and went, okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is basically build the Jason Nellis show. And it's just, if I were Conan O'Brien, how would I build an hour of content?
God, that was a short conversation.
It is not great. but the script that I built, I took a template from TV scripts that I had seen for years past in working in TV production for a brief moment, and basically just scripted out like what would be the talking points we would use, what would be the flow of the show, when would we go back and forth. If I were to actually record that show and put it on video, nobody would watch it. It was a complete mess. But it gave us a lot of conversation starting places to say, well, we should aim for this length. We should cut these parts out.
And how long was that process of developing that first script?
2 weeks.
Okay.
Maybe
fast,
3.
Yeah,
not long. Just
not like you invest a year in it.
Yeah, it took me 2 days to really think out and write the script. It took us a little while to get everybody on the same page about what we liked and didn't like about the script. And then it was a matter of actually procuring a camera, procuring lights, getting the right microphone, and trying it out. And
that whole process is 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of getting the cameras, let's call it 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's call it a month-long process.
That's great.
The first episode we recorded, I could not be more uncomfortable. And the sound was bad, and the lighting. It
sounds like a recurring theme. Every sort of like new thing, you're incredibly uncomfortable.
If you're not ready to be uncomfortable in the world of whatever it is you're doing, you should go and just get a 9 to 5.
Yep.
It is going to be a theme of my life, and I cannot think of anybody who is more uncomfortable in more constant states than me. But here I am, and I'm still doing it. Yeah. No, the first episode we filmed it. We essentially did small takes that we then pieced together with other videos. And Unboxed Daily, as the show is called, started as really just 45 seconds of introduction from me, auto playing 9 minutes of a YouTube video, another 45-second interstitial, and then etc. And that format over time, we saw some response to it. We changed the format to be shorter. Then eventually we changed the format to be, one self-contained video where we actually, through fair use, pull small clips from other videos and insert them into our own. And right now, that has proven to be the format that we like the most. There's pluses and minuses to it like anything else. But if you look at 5 months of daily work, I think I filmed something like, I think it's seriously like 50 or 60 episodes at this point. Like I have to actually go back and do the count.
Yeah.
But it's insane. It's an insane number of episodes. And in the same way as like, for those of you who play like World of Warcraft or those kind of things, you play the game where you have to grind something for a couple of days. That's what it felt like over the course of weeks. It was just the same process over and over again. Little tweaks, learning how to say the right line in the right way, eventually building confidence and learning how to get the right microphones and bringing somebody in to do the editing. Because we started with one of the guys in our office. I can do the editing. Turns out we've got somebody who can do as much editing, if not more, in a faster pace because it's what he does for a living.
Right.
All that stuff that then eventually comes together for 5 to 8 minutes every day of actually pretty competent content. Is it going to win awards and, line our pockets with money? Probably not. I'd like to hope, but probably not. But what it will do, is educate. It has educated me, and something like that would educate anyone in the ways of learning how to do the thing you want to do right, even if it's not the way you thought you were going to do it at first.
And I think as you shared earlier, it's helped inform the product. That process of creating has essentially helped you move through cycles on what the end product should be, which I think is what people sometimes fail to realize, is that the process of creating content and be it a video series like you're doing now or a podcast before or an event, those are just ways to increase the cycle time that you can learn, which I think is a really interesting insight that you share.
I think it's really important to remember when you're building these things that patience is ultimately the one quality everyone has to have. Everyone wants to do it now, do it fast, do it effectively. I want to come down like a hammer and just, nail this. But the reality is that good work takes time. Good work is geological. It's not instantaneous. And we're fortunate that, we've been able to learn a lot in a very rapid pace because we have the runway to just say, okay, go learn about this for 6 months. Go do it as often as possible. Hate yourself, hate the process, hate what you produce, and then get good at it. And eventually go, I want to share this with people.
Yep.
Patience is more than anything else, whether it's ingenuity or creativity or risk-taking or whatever. I actually believe that the core characteristic every entrepreneur has to have is patience, because without it, the rest don't matter.
Yep.
You can talk about your fast, iterative, lean-based process and use all the buzzwords that all buzz. It doesn't matter if you don't give it time.
Yeah. So I want to kind of, one of the things that's interesting about you as a creator is that you sort of sampled across a lot of these mediums.
Yeah.
And so part of that, in order to be a rapid learner, as you've sort of self-described, and I would concur with, is that you have to find people to learn from.
Yeah.
So I want to go through each of the platforms that you've been engaged with, and kind of do some rapid fire on who are the people that you most learn from. And let's start with the recent one. Who are the people that you find are doing it the best? That if you were just starting this process of creating your own video series again, who would you go out and learn from? Who would you study? Who would you watch their episodes to learn from?
So on the actual video production side, the two guys I would point to are Casey Neistat, who is an incredibly famous YouTuber who has broken records in terms of the number of people who follow him, and an incredibly talented filmmaker. And another guy named Peter McKinnon, who is, I think, one of the fastest growing channels on YouTube. I think in a little over a year, he's grown to 1.5 million subscribers from next to nothing. And both of them are incredibly talented videographers. They're incredibly talented editors. And they give a lot of advice on their channels about what equipment they use, how they do it. I think Peter McKinnon sells Lightroom presets so you can actually learn his actual process if you have the coin for it. But otherwise, it's just, here's all of it presented for free.
Right.
In terms of the unboxing and product reviewers that I would point to, I have to be careful about who I say as favorites because we work with a lot of them.
Yeah, sure.
But I do think that there are a couple that I would point to. One is Austin Evans and the guys who are part of what they call Team Crispy. But it's Austin Evans, Jonathan Morrison, Your Average Consumer, Unbox Therapy, and there's one other I'm going to get yelled at for having forgotten. But these are guys who are all Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD. These five guys came up at the same time in terms of doing unboxing videos. They all started many, many, many years ago, but they are all incredibly talented at unboxing, reviewing, and showcasing that video. Some of them are by themselves. Some of them have whole teams that work with them. But ultimately, what they all provide is a really great template for understanding and seeing what that world presents. Other guys that I would point to, there's Kevin the Tech Ninja, who is a phenomenal talent out of Detroit. There's Andrew Edwards, who's the editor of Gear Live in Seattle. Tech Me Out is a phenomenal talent. She is out of North Carolina, I believe. There's also Crystal Laura, who's out of Jersey. I mean, all of these people, Daily Tech in Denver. I mean, all of these guys are remarkable talents who just love what they do and started by themselves.
Yep.
Nobody here is, even if they're part of production companies and multi-channel networks now, none of these guys started as, big backed personalities who had existing things. Like they were just passionate people who put their passions on film and just eventually figured out what they wanted to do. Yep. I mean, particularly I love to use these examples. Like Austin Evans has done this for 8 or 9 years and his early stuff is not great. He will be the first one to tell you. His whole thing is like, it's a screen cap of his iPhone and it's, hi, my name is Austin. Today we're going to be learning. And, nowadays he makes me look quiet. Like these are time-honed skills and they take time and you just have to be okay with that.
Yep. How about take us into podcasting? Obviously it's been a little, when you were starting out, it was early, right?
Yeah. My inspiration was actually more from radio. And this is going to sound very silly, but my dad's been in advertising on radio for decades. And for me, he and my stepmother have a radio show every week here in DC called Foodie and the Beast. And podcasting for me very much came from listening to their radio show for a decade and learning and understanding how to interview people and how to engage with them. My father every now and again makes it more about him than the show, but he's learned over time. He's much better about it now. But more than that learning from them and their dynamic as a pair, as well as them in their interactions with their audiences, they have an audience. They have a great audience. And seeing them just every week, just consistently doing the same and then increasingly better quality over time is all the advice and all the work you need to see to know how to do it right.
Yeah. And what's been your reaction to seeing podcasting kind of really kind of boom in a lot of ways over the last couple of years since you filmed your final episode?
Well, to me, it's really funny that for years, everybody has been talking about the death of radio.
Right.
And now we're in the death of TV and all that. these things don't go away. They
That's right.
transform,
They
they
just
iterate,
change.
they
Yep.
build and change. And the fact that radio still exists is actually really, like, it's impressive. Clear Channel makes a ton of money every year from
Yep.
radio advertisements.
Yep.
I'm not surprised that podcasting has become a thing. I don't know that I necessarily predicted it as a trend, but in retrospect, I see how it happened and why it happened.
Mhm.
We are still, in many ways, learners by listening. There are many people out there who prefer it because they can multitask while they listen to it.
Yep.
And it's become a much more personal experience. The way that radio was in the early days, when everybody would gather around and listen to The Shadow, it's this event that has to
Right.
happen. The appointment part of it has mostly gone away. But if you look at something like Serial,
Yep.
everybody talked about Serial when
Yep.
it was out.
Yep.
Everybody wanted to be part of that. The way that Game of Thrones is still a thing now that everybody wants to talk about. Full disclosure, I don't watch Game of Thrones, but it's really good when I do. Mostly, though, the old lessons still come back. Even on mobile today, one of my favorite apps is an app called HQ, which is a trivia game. It is live. It happens twice a day during weekdays and once a day on weekends. And it is appointment-based viewing. There is no on-demand part of it. There's no version of it you can download and play on your own. It's just, hey, here's, it's 9:00, log on, 12 questions. If you make it to the end, you split whatever the pot is with everybody else. It is frustrating as all get out that I can't win, but it has trained me that every day when I feel the buzz, man, whatever I'm doing, I'm pausing to play.
Yep.
Radio is of the same vein. Podcasting is of the same vein. It all just changes. But at the core, the lessons of we're all storytellers and we all want to listen to each other still remains.
What about events? Any events that you sort of have great experience events you've had that have informed you that you would point to learn about how to put on great events?
So if I'm looking at events I've participated in rather than events I've worked on, big scale events like E3 or Comic-Con of that nature, great information on how to really build an event and an experience and when it works and when it doesn't. Comic-Con I love because all the vendors that are at Comic-Con, aside from feeding that nerdy part of me, they all fit the theme. They're all part of a larger community and they all work really well. E3, if you go on the floor of E3, it's whatever brands paid money. And that's not to crap on E3. It's just that at a certain point, you're like, well, I got this booth space and I need to sell it. So yeah, M&M's and DJI, which is a drone company, you guys can coexist in the same space.
Right.
It makes it a mess. And that's okay. There's lots of other stuff at E3 that's really valuable. I keep doing that. That wasn't E3. That was VidCon. I'm sorry. Sorry, E3. But something like that where it doesn't fit the theme. VidCon is all about video creators. Why is M&M's there? Something like that. In terms of the stuff that is smaller scale, actually the best information, like the best informer on that is weddings.
Yeah.
Weddings and bar mitzvahs. Like if you go to a wedding and everything feels seamless and you walk in the door and you are treated like royalty or the guests of royalty, and it's all just simple and laid out and you don't have to think about anything, that tells you all you need to know. It's performance, it's coordination, it's resources, it's practice. All of that informs it. At a bad wedding or bar mitzvah where things are falling apart and you can see it falling apart or something goes awry, the axis of the top spins out of control and it's all a mess. Having put them on, I can really appreciate how hard that is and how much work it takes to really get it right. And not showing what doesn't go well behind the scenes to your audience is really important.
That's interesting. I think it's an interesting way to sort of get some experiences. Hey, why don't go chase people around at a wedding and see how that experience goes and learn a lot about how to put on an event that's more like a panel or a sit down, I think is really an interesting insight.
Well, years ago, I took courses on stage management and, I stage manage plays and produce them. And that, it turns out, was very informative to this other stuff in the event space. But what really educated me more than anything else was the conference that we helped put on that was 1,000 people in attendance over 2 days that required, huge budgets and big names. And we had folks from Google X and, the then CTO of the United States came and was one of our keynote speakers. We had all these great names. And if they don't feel as though they're well treated, if they don't feel as though the experience is well managed, you're screwed.
Yep.
I literally had to personally handle Walt Mossberg from the Wall Street Journal, because if somebody didn't, he would write horrific things about us. And instead, I got a LinkedIn invite from him.
Yeah.
So it all works out.
He's like the mother-in-law that you got to make sure is really happy, right?
Boy, yes.
Yes, very happy. Mr. Nellis, this was super delightful. And I think, we can all check you out on unbox.tv.
Absolutely.
And I think it's fascinating to hear your adventures in touching all of these different these mediums, because I think that's sometimes people get wrapped around I can't be in, I can't do video or I can't do this or whatever it is. And in some ways you're sort of breaking the mold and being a Renaissance creator and trying all these things, whether whether in each case you were terrible and had to grow into them.
True.
But, it's I think it's instructive for people, I think, to know.
Well, I appreciate that. I think the one parting piece of wisdom I would offer is that you never know when relationships are going to be the thing that drives you to your next step. You and I got introduced by Eric Fang all those years ago.
Yep.
You pawned me off on other people, and that's fine. I've forgiven you for that. But those relationships and later yours and my relationship became instructive in many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that was going to be a thing. I came to you hoping that I would find a job. Instead, I found a friend and a mentor, and ultimately, those relationships have come back to pay dividends when I have needed them the most.
Yep.
So, to anybody listening, I really offer that patience is an absolute important virtue to have, but also being mindful of your relationships, being as generous as you can be. The old adage of karma, what you put out in the world is what you get back. I really do believe in. You don't always get it back in the right amount.
Right.
You don't always get it back when you think you need it.
Right.
But the river bends towards good if you drive it that way.
Yep. Play the long game. It seems to always work out for all of us.
In the end, I think so.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for coming, Mr. Nellis.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
I'm excited to audition one day for your wedding aficionados.
You gotta, having done it myself, you got a high bar to hit.
Listen, I've done 3 of them, including an Indian wedding where I was the moderator between a Hindu family and a Muslim family. So I have to say, listen, if I can navigate that, I can damn near navigate anything.
But can you handle a Jewish/Californian wedding? I'm not so sure.
That's a very good point. More soon.
All right.
Bye.